If church isn't pissing you off sometimes, though, then like you're probably at the wrong church.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really easy to preach a sermon where you just dog on things, and you say like, "This is not what Scripture says or teaches." Like, it's really easy to do that.
Yeah.
It's harder to preach a sermon, I think, that is genuine and uplifting at the same time as it is teaching something. And that's kind of like what I think is like, I don't want like my preaching and my sermons to just be like an endless tirade against the things that annoy me in the name of Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because there are, dude, I know so many, I'm not going to call out anybody specific. I've met so many pastors who are like that, who are just like, I feel really strongly about this specific thing, so I'm going to get up in front of my congregation and yell about it each Sunday. Right. And it's like, maybe you should preach the gospel, dude. You know, like your job.
That's good Bible.
Your job is to preach the gospel. Maybe focus on that a little bit rather than.
You know what's a big pet peeve I have that I just realized coming over here? When we say like, oh, they're in ministry.
Yeah. He might walk all over your keyboard there.
Hey, buddy.
You can chuck him.
I don't want to chuck him. This is the only cat I like. We've talked about this before. When people say that they're in, like, or when they say of people, oh, they're in ministry. It's like, no, they're doing ministry.
You're just going to set up right there, huh? Huh, bud? You're not going to move?
I know that Joe likes me. Still like right here.
He's not going to kick me off.
Just chill. Chill, bro.
Chill. Relax.
Can you just
you are not chill right now.
Right here. That works, right?
If it's not on the lap, he doesn't want it.
If it's not on my laptop, he doesn't want it. All right. You ready for a cow joke?
Do you want to finish your thought with what you're saying with
in ministry?
Yeah.
Because like
why is saying people are would you say people are doing ministry or are in ministry?
It's better to say ministry is something that you do, not something that you're in. Like everybody should do ministry. Every Christian should do some form of ministry.
Yeah.
Like I give that blanket statement and a gross generalization without hang up or reservation or stipulation at all. All Christians should be in ministry in some form, because that's what we're called to do, is to
I agree.
Be ambassadors for the kingdom and serve.
Great commission.
Yeah. And so it's like when you say, like, I feel like the idea of saying, oh, they're in ministry, what you mean is like they're in informal paid ministry. And it's just like, okay, sure, but why? That's not super different than what everybody's called to do. It just so happens to be that the church supports this specific person to lead them. Yeah. So it's like, why don't even say like in ministry? Like we do ministry. Like it's we do ministry. The church does ministry. It's just so disingenuous. It's like when you start saying that, and I use the term too, so it's just like it detracts from the idea that we're all called to do ministry. And I think that historically I'm backed up by that. Yeah. And
we are all called to do ministry.
Yeah, you go to any church in New England and they'll be like, oh, that's the guy who does ministry. Like nobody else does ministry. It's like, what are you, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my thought.
I see. You know what? I started not on your side, and then I think you convinced me.
Yeah, because I'm right. And you're like, yeah.
Well, I think I think sometimes people just use it as a shorthand to say, like, because it's easier to say, oh, they're in ministry rather than like they're in a ministry position or a position of ministry, you know. But I do think there is like something to be said about language and making sure we're accurate with our terms and stuff. So I see where you're coming from.
I just want to be helpful.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want you to think that you shouldn't be doing ministry because that's the person who's in ministry. Yeah. It's like, I'm all about clarity. Like, whatever helps you understand this better. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not saying that, because like I said, I've used the term too. It is a shorthand, but whatever. Okay. Are you ready for a cow joke now?
Dude, I'm so ready for a cow joke, and then I immediately have another rant that I want to go on. So hit me with the cow joke.
Okay, sweet. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Joe.
Where would you find a cow having a really bad day?
Where?
McDonald's.
I I talk good. Oh, Jordan knows a single theological term. Watch out, everybody. Reading is such an essential skill to life. How is anyone bad at it?
Yeah, I'm pumped. Do I sound pumped? I will play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
You're not Jesus or Paul. Lay your philosophy on. Destroy me with your facts and logic. We disagree on just about every, like, secondary major aspect of Christianity.
That's pretty good.
Is that real?
I like that
Is
one.
that a real laugh?
Yeah, no, that was a real
cool.
one. I wasn't expecting McDonald's. I think your boom arm is hitting the side of your laptop.
Sorry.
That's
you
okay.
can edit that out.
Yeah, I can. I sure can try.
Fix it in post.
No, that was good. I wasn't expecting you to say McDonald's. So, isn't that half of comedy is subverting expectation?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I could have said Five Guys.
Yeah. I do.
What were you
That's
expecting?
only going to be funny to us.
Do people know about the Greater Sacred Cows movement?
People know about Five Guys.
People know about Five Guys. There's Five Guys all over the place. I was in Chicago and there was a Five Guys. I never went to it, but it was there.
No, I mean, that's okay. I'm not going to explain. Never mind.
Okay.
Never mind. I'm over it. My original rant that you just reminded me of, and I've been seeing like videos all about this for the past couple weeks, and it has resonated with me because I realize I do this and we do this during our podcast, that whenever we say anything, we have to be like, and I want to be clear, I'm not talking about like this situation or this scenario, or if you're going through this, then this doesn't apply to you, and like all this, if the shoe fits, wear it, and all this stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we do that all the time.
And I hate doing that, and I feel like that has become a necessity because apparently all these studies are coming out now where Gen Z is horribly media illiterate, and so they are like very bad. And because I realize I picked this up in youth group, because if you say something, you know, like grass should be green or whatever, you would have people who are like, well, my grass is brown and I like it like that. It's like people, like a lot of people lack the critical thinking and understanding to like to sort through what people are saying and realize that like not everything is a completely definitive statement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that gets on my nerves. Like, I hate doing that. I wish I could just say something and not have to like put out 8 different prefaces on, but if you're in this situation, it doesn't apply to you, and if you're in this situation, then it's okay and you don't have to worry about it. Like, I think I'm just gonna start saying stuff. And if people are mad at me, then sorry, man. I won't say it's on you, because I can definitely say stupid stuff, but you know,
Jordan never says.
I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of being like, oh, but if you need this thing, blah blah blah. I don't care. I'm over it. If you misinterpret what I'm saying, then that's on you past this point.
I think context is important and stuff like that. It's like, obviously, you know the difference between somebody who's just trying to be a tool who understands what you're saying, and somebody who's really like, well, what about this scenario? And I've had conversations with both types of people when, you know, you're preaching or teaching any kind of like formal lesson, where people will come up afterwards like, hey, I actually didn't think of this, but what do you think about how this fits into your like dichotomy or whatever? And then somebody who's just like, well, you said this, and that was wrong. Yeah. You can tell the difference right away. It takes you 2 seconds. Yeah.
Man. Hey, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
I'm Joe.
I didn't say
I'm Joe.
I'm Jordan. I don't think I said thank you. Welcome to the Sacred Cows podcast. So that's on me. But thank you for being here. We hope you guys are liking the content and are looking forward to this episode. If you couldn't tell from the title, because I usually title them something weird and obnoxious, today we're talking about philosophy. Finally, Joe. Joe finally gave me one topic that I get to talk about that's in my wheelhouse. He was like, okay, you can have one. You can have one time. Better not screw it up. I'm just kidding. That was all a joke.
I don't feel, to be fair, I don't feel like this is the first time I've said, hey, do you want to do this topic? Like,
yeah, and then I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
I don't. But we're talking about philosophy because I feel like this could be a good topic for an episode, because a lot of most Christians, I would say, don't know very much about philosophy at all. And then there is a very vocal subset of Christians who think philosophy is bad or worthless, and that we should not utilize it in any way. So we're going to be talking about that throughout the episode. If that interests you, please stick around. It's going to be a good time. I think, dude, that was a hop.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you.
That was dope.
You still can't be on my lap, though. I think we're going to read some comments first, though.
Yeah, so the last episode that we launched was like, I think it's in the top 2 or 3 episodes that we've ever done. So people really liked that one. It got a lot of likes.
Really?
Yeah. So I was like, that's cool. But there was a bunch of comments, and there's a few comments from when we did stuff with Sydney that I want to read too.
Yeah.
The first one really warmed my heart. This is by a friend of a friend. I won't say the name, but I mean, I suppose you could go look it up. But we'll start here. This is on our cessationist double-teamed Miracles Are Demonic episode. God has really been using y'all to convict and hopefully change the way I think about my opinions and beliefs with other believers who I disagree with. I'd forgotten that just because someone has a different belief than me doesn't mean they love God or people any less. Your podcast has reminded me that 2 believers with equally strong and biblically supported convictions can disagree and love God and people equally. Thanks for that. God is using you.
Amen.
It really warmed my heart.
That's awesome.
I was like, we've gotten a lot of like not great comments. It's like, oh, that's good. Yeah.
Dude, if like mission accomplished, you know, if we're trying to do one thing with this podcast, it's display Irenic love like that, you know? So I'm glad. And it's a journey. I'm not going to sit here and say that like I don't still get upset with other Christians who hold different theological beliefs than me. You know, I'm tempted to argue on Facebook sometimes, as we all are, I'm sure. But,
there's a solution to that.
Get off Facebook.
Just don't have a Facebook.
Yeah.
Name me one thing that it adds to your life.
It allows me to connect with other scholars and philosophers for my schooling.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Like in a way that you wouldn't be able to in some other avenue?
In a way that, dude, you're being obnoxious right now. In a way that, I can immediately get notified of what they're doing and like comment on their stuff and like follow what they're doing, you know? So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're like, couldn't be me.
Not worth it. What I found, here's why I got off of Facebook. We'll clip this for a quick little pithy, like TikTok or Instagram reel or whatever, but
yeah,
here's why I got off
of Facebook. On social media as we post to social media.
I got off of Facebook because I would scroll and I would just get angry.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, well, I don't want to see that. And I would get rid of it. I would be like, don't show me stuff like this. And then I realized that I would just sit there and scroll and all I would get was ads and stuff. Like I had created an echo chamber for myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you would do the thing where you would comment on people and you can say the most like genuine, real thing on Facebook and somebody will come out of nowhere and do what we were just talking about was, actually, what about people like this? Or what about this situation? It's like, I don't think this actually adds anything to my life in any meaningful way. That doesn't just make me angry.
Yeah.
And it's like, I could do with less anger in my life.
Yeah.
That'd be chill.
Man, I get that. Facebook doesn't make me that way, but the brief time that I was on Twitter
X.
Definitely. Yeah, sorry, X. Sorry, Elon, don't sue us.
Elon, if you're listening, I'm sorry.
Big E. Twitter made me that way because Twitter is like, obviously everybody knows how Twitter works. It's like 144 characters in each tweet. So every tweet is like tiny and lacks all context. And so people just say the most outrageous, like the dumbest things because they know it's going to get rage engagement, which it does, and it works. And oh man, it's so awful. I've never seen a single tweet that I liked that I was like, oh yeah, that actually adds something to the public discourse. Yeah. It's all awful. Twitter is awful. Terrible idea. And not just because Elon owns it now. It was bad before that.
Yeah, so get off of social media. Okay, except if you want to look at Sacred Cows Pod.
Hey, we're on social media.
Reels and TikTok. In that case, like, comment, and subscribe and whatever. Follow us, share us with your friends, rate us 5 stars on Spotify, do all of this social media nonsense. Please do that. We love the engagement. Okay, so this comment was, you remember last week I read that comment? I was like, what is this person saying?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody commented on that trying to take a stab at explaining what it was.
Okay.
So this is like the military,
Yeah.
that comment.
Yeah.
This person says, I believe this comment is referring to PT belts, which are just reflective belts that the military forces people to wear so that they don't get run over when running in the dark. I haven't had to wear one since I left training. Perhaps active duty soldiers still have to on post. The joke is that people wouldn't die if they had their PT belts on for anything. That is pretty funny. It's like, you should have had your PT belt on. You wouldn't have died.
That's a solid bit.
That's a good bit. There was this soldier in Alaska that got mauled by a bear, and we joked that it wouldn't have happened if he had his PT belt on. That's so funny.
That is really funny.
So, and they end with, so perhaps this comment is saying that what is considered orthodox gets added as heresies arise, new rules that weren't there before and may not be needed, kind of like OSHA regulations.
Dang. I don't know who you are, commenter, but I want to shake your hand.
Yeah,
because
seriously.
That is incredibly
Y'all
coherent,
out there,
and I'm so amazed that you parsed that out.
Y'all out there doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Your brain is like working overtime. You must be a very smart individual, and I mean that very sincerely.
Yeah.
Dang.
So, do you want to respond to that, aside from
about
Orthodox
the
being
whole,
OSHA regulations?
Like, Orthodoxy is added to as stuff pops up.
Yeah.
Well, at first, definitely, before, when the church was very new and people were still figuring it out, there was no set in stone, like, this is the theology you must follow, because everybody's still figuring stuff out, right?
Right.
I think once you get to Nicaea, once you have the church council where all the churches come together and they're like, okay, what do Christians believe? Like, what do we all uniquely and unanimously believe, and what falls outside of that? And they come up with the Nicene Creed. As soon as that happens, that is orthodoxy, as far as I'm concerned. And it's not like that hasn't changed over the years, you know? Like, outside of... Can you think of a single, like, I would say, dogmatic issue that falls outside of the Nicene Creed?
Maybe how you understand baptism. Maybe.
Yeah. But even that has had, like, detractors throughout history that were not declared, like, heretics.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. For me, personally,
I would
for me,
think about it.
The Nicene Creed is the standard of orthodoxy. And so if you're a Christian and you are within the Nicene Creed, I think you can claim to be Christian still. Mm. So that's
also,
my opinion.
I think that it's a really real thing that we do theology when problems come up.
Yeah.
It's like the Holy Spirit, like you're going through life, you're doing theology, the Holy Spirit like prompts you to understand that a specific belief is not quite right. And so you're like, I don't really know what the answer is, but I know it's not that. Mm-hmm. And so that actually, in some sense, the church owes a debt to heresy. I think I said that at one point, because we do theology in response to issues and things like that. It's like, you'd be a hot topic. You can cut this out. So cut it out, Jordan, right here if you need to. But like transgenderism, right?
I'm not cutting this out.
Now we have to have a stance on transgenderism. In the past 2,000 years, the church never would have thought, except for outliers, that we would have to have a official church stance on what we believe about transgenderism.
Yeah.
So like we do theology in response to things like that. And so in that sense, I think it is totally valid that heresy helps us develop what we actually believe. And that's what happened with Arius, right? Mm-hmm. It's like he gives his pitch and then people start tearing their clothes. They're like, we don't know what we believe, like on paper, but we know it's not that.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that sounds not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think it's partially valid, but I don't think it's a valid criticism.
Yeah.
If that kind of
If anything, I think it's a reinforcer that for Orthodox belief, because like these things didn't happen just smack that thing. There was people putting real thought into it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more.
Yeah.
This is on our purity culture episode.
Classic. I can't remember anything.
The second one. Yeah. This person says, in my personal experience, it wasn't so much that I was promised good things from purity culture, but that I would avoid horrible things. The problem with that, though, ends up being when you grow up and you meet a wider variety of people, many which are not Christian, and are not saving sex for marriage, you begin to notice that a lot of them have perfectly healthy relationships, despite having not followed the biblical model. It ends up making the beliefs you were raised with feel silly at best or controlling and manipulative at worst.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I vaguely remember bringing this up, and we had like you were attacking it from like a positive point, and I was approaching it from a negative perspective. Yeah, I think that's 100% valid. I would critique where you said that like they have perfect relationships. I know you're just probably being.
They said perfect. They said healthy, but yes.
Oh, healthy relationships.
Oh, perfectly. No, I'm
perfectly
sorry.
Healthy
right.
relationships.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were just
hyperbolic.
Being hyperbolic there, which is totally fine. I don't think anybody has like a perfectly healthy relationship.
I would also want to know what you would consider a healthy relationship, because there's plenty of relationships that aren't Christian relationships, as well as plenty of relationships that people consider to be healthy relationships, and they're just not. They're not a biblical model.
Like polygamy is taking a huge upswing, is like coming back,
right?
Is like polygamous relationships. And I would argue, because people are like, oh, well, if they're happy with that, then what's the big deal? Which is like a deeper topic about how we emphasize happiness above everything else, like it's the supreme virtue when it's not. And B, I don't think that they are. I think people put up masks, and sometimes we have issues that don't come to light until like several years later, and we don't realize how unhealthy something is. And so but to the point that you're making, like I totally see that, and I totally 100% agree, because if you grow up in like a very sheltered Christian home, and I saw this, and you are told that like your life will be ruined if you have sex outside of marriage, and then you hit high school and you start hanging out with and you meet tons of people who have sex all the time and they seem totally fine. You're like, dude, this does not line up at all with what I was taught my entire life. And that's very devastating. Like that can be a very bad thing. So I 100% agree.
Yeah. However, that does not make the teaching invalid, because just because something appears to be healthy on the outside doesn't mean it actually is, which I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We'll do one more. There's a few, but we'll do one more and we'll save the rest for another time.
Oh man, we got time.
You want to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got to do a little bit of a longer episode this week since we missed last week.
Yeah. Which, if you don't know, we missed last week because it was the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was Super Bowl Sunday.
And also, I think somebody in my family was sick anyway.
Yeah.
We had a whole it was a whole thing. All right. So this person says, this is on our Christians Need to Stop Saying This episode. It's crazy how similar Christians are all over the world. I grew up in a church in Bulgaria and have seen and heard everything you commented on. Love the episode. Keep them coming. Dang. Shout out to Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Christians in Bulgaria.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. You don't realize how samey a lot of churches are. Like, you know, you get differences. Of course, you get like cultural differences and stuff. And I'm not saying like every church is the same, but I think you would be surprised going to other countries if you go to a service on Sunday, how similar it is to many church services here, you know?
Yeah. I think that people want to talk about these massive cultural differences, but I think that in different churches, and I think that that's fair. I think there are quite a few like things that are just cultural. But I also think that there's a lot of things that are just consistent.
Yeah.
And I think it would surprise you which things are. I think specific lines of reasoning and how people think about things are pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty same.
I don't know.
Pretty similar.
Yeah. Somebody will disagree with me.
But shout out to Bulgaria, dude. Thanks for being here.
That's awesome. I don't know if they're in Bulgaria now, but they grew up there. So that's cool. I love that you put Eastern Europe in parentheses. Like I don't know where Bulgaria is.
Well, to be fair, Americans are bad at
I'm certain
geography.
that's a scar that you carry of having people be like, Bulgaria, where's Bulgaria?
Man.
Yeah.
You get that with other Americans, get that with other Americans though. I don't know if people realize that.
Dude, so I did my undergrad in Chicago, right? And we're in New England, and we're in New Hampshire specifically, but I never told anybody I was from New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And it was because nobody knows where New Hampshire is. I just say New England.
You have to run through the gauntlet. You know how many people I told that like I was by Boston, even though I'm not by Boston,
right?
But just like that is the closest thing that anybody is going to have any semblance of knowledge about. I just have, I'm from outside Boston. It's like,
And then you say New England, it's like, oh, Boston. It's like,
I had somebody when I first went to school. I said something about like being from New England or whatever, and they're like, "You're from New England? You are all from New England, but you're from different states." Because I was with some like other people who were from different states, and we were talking about it, and we were like, "Yeah, we're from different states, but we're all like all the states are New England." And they're like, "I thought New England was a state."
Yeah, you get that.
Yeah,
I had a very similar experience.
Yeah,
with that, so it's funny, dude.
So it happens to us too.
Yeah.
It's not just like a non-American,
but. Thing. There's trauma there, I'm sure. So I want to.
Yeah.
All right. So this is on Miracles Are Demonic. And this guy comments on our stuff all the time.
Hey, thanks for being a consistent watcher and listener.
He's the Catholic commentator. I think this is like his fourth comment, but he was also the guy that took his stab at explaining that last rant.
Oh yeah.
So cool, dude. It's so happy to see you again and again and again here.
We appreciate you.
But he says on the Miracles Are Demonic, at the beginning, when Joe mentioned that people at church ask him if Jordan is a heretic, made me laugh way harder than it should have. Sydney is also a good addition to the podcast. You should tell him. Let him know, man. Let him know that we like Sydney.
Shout out our boy Sydney.
I agree with Joe a lot in this one. As a Catholic, I do believe that the Holy Spirit is active in the church at every Mass. Ooh. But I am skeptical of some miracles, as you should be. I get weird looks when I push back at accepting every Marian apparition. David Hume is largely right in his critique of miracles. The New Apostolic Reformation is troublesome. Apostle Catherine Crick, I think I pronounced that right, being the prime example. Joe summed it up well at timestamp. Then Jordan retorted correctly. What a cop-out. If you edit that, Joe also sounds like a universalist. That is funny, but to be fair, if you edit, you can literally edit anything to make anybody say anything.
Yeah, which is really funny. Yeah. Man, there are so many different parts of this comment that I want to comment on. We do not have time to get into Marian apparitions. Well, I think, we have a lot of Catholic listeners, first of all, which I love. I love and appreciate all of our Catholic listeners. Thank you guys for being here. I think Joe and I are both Protestant, though, so I'm sure you guys can figure out how we feel about Marian apparitions. And I'm not saying, I want to be clear again. I'm doing it. I'm not saying for sure that they all have not happened or anything. I'm not completely excluding them, but I'm going to take the Protestant position on that one. It is interesting that you brought up David Hume, and I don't want to tear you down because I don't know you, and thank you for listening.
And commenting consistently.
I do have to comment on David Hume because you're referencing, for those of you who don't know, Hume was a atheistic philosopher. He lived, I'm pretty sure it's the 1700s. 18th century. He writes a book called Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. And most of his argument is against miracles, and he essentially states that miracles can't happen because I don't have time to get into the whole argument. He says miracles can't happen, that they're logically probably impossible. Hume is not considered valid by most philosophers alive today, even atheistic ones. So his arguments, and maybe that would be like a fun bonus episode if we ever start doing bonus episodes or something. I can diagram why his argument fails and why it's not very good. But Hume does not actually defeat miracles. So if you are interested in any of that, I can shoot some articles your way if you want to comment on this episode or something.
Yeah, but if you're watching,
if you're sticking around.
Yeah. But I do, you know what I like about this comment though? He's on my side this time. Largely.
He is.
Whatever that means.
Man, I was one of my most memorable experiences as a specifically as a Pentecostal, I guess, because growing up evangelical Pentecostal, I was used to being alone. We visited our Catholic friends, or our Catholic friend at that time. This was before she was married. And we went to a Saturday night mass with her. And after the mass, they were having, it was part of the school that she was attending at the time. And so they had like a Catholic organization student body. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it was like something along those lines. And they were conferring over like a new cabinet, because the previous people were all graduating and leaving, and so they had elected new people and they were conferring them in. And part of it was like they had everybody gather around them and lay hands on them, and everybody was like praying out loud for these people who were taking these positions. And I was like, oh my gosh, these Catholics look like Pentecostals. Like, this is a very Pentecostal thing to do. But it was so natural, and like nobody had a problem with it. And I was like, dang. And that, I think that was like one of the most, that was one of the points in my life that started my like interest in Catholicism, and like challenged my notions about what I believed about it before. Because I was like, dang, these Christians look like my sort of Christians, you know?
That person's less Christian than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just really cool. Yeah. It was really cool.
Well, I mean, cool, I had a similar experience when I met you.
Yeah.
Where I was like, dude, this guy's different, but like we agree on so many things.
Mm-hmm.
I know we talk a lot about like it's popular, because that's our whole selling point for this podcast, is that we disagree on everything, but like we agree on a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
Like
we do.
It's just that those things aren't as funny to talk about.
Right. Man. Got any more?
No, that's it.
That's it.
There was a few others, but they were like from way back, so I won't bring those up.
Man, thank you for being here. I'm not gonna say if you're watching this. One of our friends was talking to me the other day, and he was like, "Jordan, you always say if you're watching this. If I hear the words you're saying, I'm watching it. You don't need to say if you're watching this. Thank you for being here." But thank you for being here.
But it's a bit. It's funny.
Thank you for listening to our podcast.
It's funny.
If you guys feel so led, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Even if you're not liking the episode, please comment and let us know. It still helps us out. And we really appreciate and love interacting and engaging with you guys. Be sure to subscribe, though, because once we hit 1,000 podcast subscribers, Joe and I are going to get the logo tattooed on us. Have we decided where?
Ankle.
For sure.
Right?
Ankles. We're going to get the podcast logo tattooed on our ankles. So if you want to see that, we have to get to 1,000 subscribers, so share it around. Man, Joe, you want to talk about philosophy?
Yeah, we're talking about philosophy this week. The running gag is that I hate philosophy.
Right, but you do.
I don't actually hate philosophy. I think that philosophy is helpful. I'm not in the crowd of people who are like, philosophy has no point, because I think that it's much broader than when people think about philosophy. They think of snooty armchair philosophers that don't actually do anything, but just sit and talk about stuff. But you're going to school right now. You're getting your master's in philosophy specifically. So I think we kind of wanted to have an episode where we just sat down and talked about why somebody would do that specifically.
Yeah. Why a Christian would do that.
Yeah, why a Christian
who cares heavily about theology.
I've had conversations with people that I've discipled over the years, and people are always like, oh, well, every angle that you could tackle a problem from has already been done. So, like, why should we even bother anymore? Because it's all been thought of already.
Yeah, which, man, is so funny to me. Yeah, so we're talking about philosophy. I want to start with, like, what philosophy is, because I think if you're not, and I don't, like, I'm worried that this is going to like come off as sounding condescending, and I completely don't mean it that way. But I feel like if you're not in the discipline, like philosophy is kind of this like abstract catch-all term for people who like think, kind of like what you were saying, like armchair philosophers who just like sit around and like hypothesize all day.
Well, you do a fair amount of that, though.
You do like, I'm not going to say that's inaccurate. It is a little accurate, but so philosophy, there are a couple, one of the issues in philosophy, Joe, because philosophy still has issues that are being solved, is a precise definition of philosophy. Isn't that kind of sucky?
It's super sucky and like hilarious.
Yeah.
You're not making your case here.
Man, I will. Okay, so I'm going to try and define what philosophy is. I'm going to give you guys a couple of different definitions because I think holistically they make the best case for what it is. So philosophy, the word comes from Greek, as does a lot of English words. And it comes from philosophia. And philosophia literally means lover of wisdom. And so the word philosophy, if you transliterate it, it means a lover of wisdom. And so that's what philosophy started as in ancient Greece. It was just like people who thought really hard about things and who loved wisdom. That is not a great definition because it's not super precise. It doesn't actually tell you a whole lot about the discipline. It's just like, oh, what do you do academically? I love wisdom.
Yeah, it also,
yeah, okay.
Like, everybody has a different definition for what lover and wisdom mean.
Yeah.
So it's not like super
hopeful. Some more modern definitions might be philosophy is the discipline that deals with life's big questions. So like, why are we here? Why do humans exist? What should we do with our lives? What's right and what's wrong? Those are questions that philosophy tries to tackle. And I think I just lost it. I had one more definition and I lost it. But my favorite quote to sum up why philosophy is important, because Christians are like, well, why does any of that matter, right? If we have the Bible answers all of our big questions, and we don't need to have any big questions answered by philosophy, which I agree that the Bible does answer many of our big questions. But one of my favorite C.S. Lewis quotes, Joe, is C.S. Lewis once said that good philosophy must exist if only to answer bad philosophy. Mm-hmm. And so, like it or not, there are a lot of bad philosophers out there, or there are a lot of humanist, atheistic philosophers out there who are proposing some pretty crazy philosophies that we don't want to become imprinted in the cultural zeitgeist. And so hopefully we have good Christian philosophers who, in the very least, bare minimum, can answer them. So that's why I think it's necessary.
It's like the apologetics angle.
Yeah. Apologetics. I think we talked a little bit about apologetics, but apologetics is largely, almost overwhelmingly philosophy. It's a philosophical field. And apologetics is just reasoned defense of the Christian faith. So you also have verses like 1 Peter 3:15 that says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give reason for the hope that you have." So Peter says, be prepared with well-reasoned answers for your faith. And that's what philosophy is concerned with having well-reasoned answers. We want to think through life's big questions. So that's broadly what philosophy is.
It's always interesting to me that verse comes from Peter.
Yeah.
Because Peter like has like 2 epistles, right? And they're just like not like, he has some of the hardest like passages in all of Scripture, but like they're just not like always super eloquent. So it's interesting to me that he's the one who's like Paul obviously like has places where he's like, oh yeah, keep track of this, like know what you believe or whatever, but it's just interesting that Peter's like, no, you have to think about what you're going to say to people when they challenge you on this.
Man, Peter is such a wild card.
I know.
I think he's like, well, all the Catholics are going to laugh if I call Peter underrated. But
underrated in Protestant circles.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
He gets dogged on a lot.
And I think some of it is deserved, I think. Yeah. But a lot of it, I think, is absolutely not deserved. And yeah, I don't want to go off on a rabbit trail. I think Peter, out of all the apostles in the gospel, has the most radical display of faith in Christ, like bar none. No other apostle even comes close to Peter walking on water, but I don't have time to get into that.
He has the highest highs and the lowest lows.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll just leave it at that.
So that's what philosophy is. It deals with life's big questions. You generally have 4 main spheres of philosophy. Joe, do you know the spheres of philosophy, the categories? Do you remember?
I remember epistemology.
Yep. Epistemology is one. Epistemology is the study of how we know things or what it means to know things. How do humans accumulate knowledge, and how do you know what you know?
Okay.
That's epistemology.
Logic.
Logic and rhetoric is exactly as it sounds like. I'm sure you all know what logic is. Logic is popularized. I'm not going to say philosophy invented logic, but in a lot of ways it pretty much invented logic. It's why it's so widespread and considered important today.
Ontology?
Ontology is not one technically, but you're very close to one.
I'm just sitting here thinking about...
It starts with an M.
Metaphysics.
Metaphysics.
Sitting here I'm sorry, Dr. Wong. Like my intro to philosophy class, like I'm seeing it all flash in front of me.
Yeah. Metaphysics is the study of, it's like the word comes from above physics or after physics. So it's like you have this physical world, and metaphysics is the study of, okay, what's above the physical world? When we talk about more abstract, like what are we talking about? So metaphysics has to deal with like, what is the nature of the universe? What does it mean to be a human, right? Like questions above the physical, essentially.
Okay.
The last one is kind of a trick question.
I don't think I'm sitting here and I don't think I know.
Because it's called the axiology, or the branch philosophy. So it's technically two in one. And I hate that we wrap up the two in one because each are very interesting on their own.
Okay, so what are the two things in it?
You're not going to guess? You're not going to guess the
two things?
Yeah.
So I remember metaphysics.
Yeah.
I said epistemology.
You said epistemology.
I said epistemology, logic, and rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I want to say something stupid like theodicy, but I know that's not a discipline. That's just a topic.
Yeah. You're missing a big one.
I know. I can feel it. I just don't remember.
Do you want me to give you the one you're probably not going to get?
Yeah.
One of the branches is aesthetics.
Okay, yeah, I would never have.
Yeah, so philosophy
aesthetics.
of beauty.
But although I think we've talked about that before.
Yeah, I think aesthetics is very underrated in the field of philosophy.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
What's
I know you can get it.
I know. What's the letter it starts with?
E.
I said epistemology.
Mm-hmm. You can tap out if you want.
Yeah, I don't know, dude.
Ethics. I knew you could get it. So moral philosophy or ethics,
Dang.
which obviously has to deal with right or wrong.
I'm so
those
sorry,
are
Dr. Wong.
Those are the big, broad spheres of philosophy. And so philosophers tend to specialize in one of those things, but they are, to a point, all of them are pretty much interconnected in very many ways. So, yeah.
They put ethics and aesthetics together?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's so weird.
I should be fair, not everybody follows those broad categories, but those are like the most widely accepted ones.
That's so weird. Like, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem?
Yeah, I think it's just like, I don't know. I would like to think that they're like, well, these are the two like more flowery philosophies
you
that
think
don't have
ethics
to deal
is
with
a
like
flowery philosophy?
Some of them are, yeah.
Jordan.
Yeah.
You think that metaphysics isn't a flowery philosophy, but you think that ethics is.
I feel like metaphysics, if we're ascribing, oh man, what's it called when you like humanize inanimate things? Anthropomorphizing. If we're gonna anthropomorphize, if we're
personification.
If we're gonna personify philosophy, I think metaphysics is like the Chad philosophy. Like that's what all the Chad footballers talk about is metaphysics.
I think everybody talks about, then logic has got to be the normie one, right?
Yeah, logic is definitely the normie
because everybody says that doesn't make logical sense, and nobody who's ever said that understands what logic actually is.
Yeah,
like as a discipline.
Yeah,
it's funny to me,
man. Another like, so historically, philosophy has been very closely intertwined with the church, sometimes as an adversary, sometimes as a mutual benefactor.
It's really interesting. Church fathers right away, right? Like you have Justin Martyr, very early apologist, and he is all about philosophy and using Platonism to like defend Scripture and to prove God.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Tertullian, who's just like, why are we bothering with this?
Yeah.
Who's like the first dude to be like, this is useless. Let's never use like philosophical thought.
Yeah. Tertullian is the one who has the famous quote. Joe already quoted it, but Tertullian says, what does Jerusalem have to do with, or what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem?
Did I steal your thunder? I'm sorry.
No. You're totally fine.
Cool.
And the point of that quote is he's just saying, like, what does philosophy have to do with theology or Christian living, like Christian thought? What do those two things have to do with each other at all? He said that, and if you notice in a lot of early church fathers, how some, like Joe was saying, a lot of them do not have a very high opinion of philosophy, because when they were around, philosophy was almost kind of viewed as its own religion, especially to a lot of the church fathers. We don't have time to get into like all the reasons why that was, but essentially it was like it had a huge cultural impact as a discipline, and it was like very influential to a lot of people. And so there are a lot of very important, revered philosophers from that time who said a lot of crazy things that contradict scripture and the teachings of the apostles. So they were not always on the best of terms.
Pagan.
Yeah, very pagan. Mm-hmm. But philosophy has also had a lot of beneficial interaction within the church, and even some apostles had some, we know that they had some glancing interactions with philosophy, especially Paul.
Yeah. Paul
references a lot of philosophical terms, and John. Did you know that the Logos that John references?
Oh, yeah.
That started as a philosophical idea. He is literally like stealing that straight from Greek philosophers and applying it to Jesus Christ.
Justin Martyr
Mm-hmm.
does that a lot because he keys into that idea of logos.
Yeah.
And like talks about that a lot. But Paul also pulls like wholesale from Plato when he gives like his family structure, like the, what is it called? The threefold household structure of like husband, wife, father, son, master, servant.
Yeah.
And it's like that. It's like he lifts that and straight up uses it to structure out. Yeah. Like multiple times when he talks about like what specific people are supposed to do and how they live their life. So yeah.
Which is super interesting. And it goes to show you like Paul was not lying when he said like all the universe declares him in his majesty, right? We can find truth in very many different things, even if those things aren't like explicitly Christian. So even though philosophy did not start out as like a specifically Christian discipline, it may be found a lot of truths that the apostles then used and co-opted and pulled to develop the scriptures, which I find very, very interesting.
Yeah, we say this at church a lot in our discipleship class. Like, truth is truth. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't matter where you got that. If it's true, it's true.
Yeah. It's good stuff. The Trinity, I know atheists get really up in arms about the Trinity. I don't know if you've ever seen videos like that where they're like, did you know the Trinity is not in the Bible? It is in the Bible. But the Trinity...
I would actually go so far as to say, and I'm a minority in people that study like biblical scholars, but not that I am a biblical scholar, but I think that you can get the Trinity from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I passionately believe that.
Yeah, I
should
agree.
Have an episode about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. But the Trinity, when Athanasius writes on the Incarnation, which is like the seminal work for where you get a lot of Trinitarian theology in Trinitarian Orthodox theology, Athanasius, that book is like 90% philosophy. It is very philosophically heavy. And so philosophy assisted with the formulation of the doctrine of the Trinity very, very heavily. And lastly, like, this is, I say this with theology all the time because some people are like, have you ever heard somebody say, well, I'm not a theologian?
Yeah.
Everybody is a theologian.
Yep.
Right? You're either a bad one or a good one, but everybody does. If you hold a single theological belief, no matter what it is, you're a theologian. And philosophy is the same way. Like, there's no such thing as you not being a philosopher. You're either a good philosopher or a bad philosopher. I guarantee you hold to certain philosophical beliefs, whether or not you realize that. So,
yeah.
So it's important that we do it well.
If you have ever been in church I never told in a conversation, be like, oh, Jesus is God. Congratulations. You're both a theologian and a philosopher.
Yep.
Like if you've ever said Jesus is king, you are both a theologian and a philosopher. Those are theological, philosophical statements.
Yeah.
That you're making.
I'll give you one. This is so nitpicky and tiny, but if you've ever said in reference to anything, that doesn't make sense, that's philosophy. You're saying that doesn't make any logical sense. And so you're engaging in the discipline of philosophy by saying that. So you're going to use philosophy either way, right? And again, to quote Lewis, we want good philosophers, if only to answer bad philosophy. So that's why it's important. Philosophy is also dealing with a lot of issues. You have what's called philosophical theology has become very popular. It's always been kind of popular, but it's hitting kind of a resurgence in recent years. And so you have a lot of philosophical theologians working on a lot of theological issues from a philosophical background, trying to fix a lot of problems. Because there are a lot. I liked you saying earlier how some people are like, oh, every issue has been settled. When now that I'm in the discipline, it feels like there are way more issues than there have ever been.
Yeah.
Like the further we get, the more questions we have, kind of thing. So there are a lot of Christian philosophers trying to work out some very strong, important issues.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that you might be tempted to believe that, like, because the world is so old. But
right.
Like, the reality of it is that, you know, a couple months ago we had a whole podcast, a couple of episodes on like Calvinism and Arminianism. It's like as though that philosophical debate was settled.
Yeah. Like
this argument has not been finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it's rough. So that was my little spiel. I guess I could go for a bit longer. Joe, how do you feel about philosophy? Are there any philosophical issues that stand out to you?
There isn't super like touchy issues that stand out to me. I think that everybody should do philosophy. And what I mean by that is like in a formal setting, everybody should take at least a basics in philosophy, at least a basics in logic.
Man, absolutely. Oh boy. I'm sure everybody out there has heard of logical fallacies.
Right.
For those of you who don't know, if an argument contains a logical fallacy, it kind of undermines the entire argument. It's not like, I want to be very careful here. It's not necessarily that the conclusion of that argument is wrong, because some people just argue poorly. And so they can be saying something that's true and just arguing for it very, very poorly. But as far as arguments go, if an argument contains a logical fallacy, you pretty much can throw it out. It's absolutely not true, or it can't be true. And dude, we were talking about politics when this episode started. You know how many politicians just like everything they say is a fallacy and everybody like eats it up, and you just don't know to catch that unless you've actually had like some training in it. Man,
probably all of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much all of them. Oh, man. Logical fallacies are fun. What's your favorite logical fallacy?
Probably the one that I come in contact with the most is a false equivalence. Because, you know, you do a lot of youth ministry and people want to do the gotcha, and it's like, oh, this thing is like this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, these are completely different premises. And you're saying that because this thing is true, then this thing should be like conformed to that. And it's like, nah, dude.
Yeah.
You can't get me with those, man. Like, I just don't care. Like, this thing is not this thing, and this thing does not equal this thing. Like, get out of here.
Yeah. Man, my favorites, because I see them all the time now, are just non sequiturs. Like, people will say, oh, this thing means this. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like, where are you getting that at all? That completely does not follow in any way.
Yeah.
Man. We had a conversation about, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say that straw men and red herrings are always like
super common.
Yeah.
Ad hominems.
Yeah.
People ad hominem all the time. So, we had a conversation one time about slippery slope fallacy.
Yeah, because it's like...
And that's a really interesting one.
So from my understanding, the slippery slope fallacy is saying that one thing leads to this thing and we don't lead this thing. We don't like this thing. It's not good. But essentially what you're saying is if this happens, it's always going to lead to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why that's a fallacy. But at the same time, like, slippery slopes do exist.
Yeah.
Like, you are going to slip and fall. Like, if you do this thing, there is a very high probability, almost certain, that this is where it's going to end up.
Yeah.
I think like confusing to me. Like, why it's a fallacy.
It's confusing to me.
Yeah.
They're really interesting because they're only fallacies if they're fallacies. And so it's like completely situational.
It's only a fallacy if it's not true.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man. But yeah, so we need logic. We need good philosophers doing some good things. I'm taking a lot of contemporary philosophy right now. Some issues that Christian philosophers are trying to parse out right now are attributes of God. I know it's like mind-blowing to some people that we don't have like a definitive list of God's attributes, but we don't, and there are a lot in contention.
I think it's funny to me that you would believe that in a God who is eternal and inexhaustible, but believe that we know everything about him.
Yeah.
That's funny to me.
Yeah. Crazy.
So if you think that, please don't.
Does God feel suffering?
Are you talking about impassibility?
Or is God perfectly happy? That's something Christian philosophers are debating right now.
I think that we don't have to
we don't have to get into this.
Yeah. Keep going.
Man.
I have thoughts on that.
There are moral issues, right? How involved in politics should Christians be? That's it's kind of a theological question, but it's also a philosophical question. Like, what is your duty to your country as a Christian? That's pretty heavily philosophy.
Which, guess what? If you think that that's been answered already, we've been talking about this one since the church started with, should we be in the Roman Legion if we love Jesus?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Literally since the beginning of the church.
Yeah. Coming up with a completely settled, cohesive, moral philosophy has not happened yet, right? Like, Christians have a lot of ideas. The most popular one has been divine command theory. So something is right or wrong depending on whether or not God commands you to do it or not. And I don't have time to get into that. There are some issues with that theory. I hate to, if anybody's like really heavy into divine command theory out there, I don't want to burst your bubble, but there are definitely some issues with it. So Christian philosophers are trying to figure that out. So welcome back. I just remembered the last definition that I somehow forgot. But the last definition for philosophy is the discipline of thinking correctly about things.
Oh, I've heard that one before.
And so obviously we want Christians to be able to think correctly about things, no matter what those things are. So
yeah,
that's why it's important. It's important that we have people who are able to contribute to the church in that way. So
yeah,
you want to ambush me with your philosophical questions?
My philosophy professor, who was more of a theologian than a philosopher, but he did do philosophy, said his favorite system of ethics was virtue theory. It was like Christ-centered virtue theory. Mm-hmm. So, but we talked about all, like, not the big ones, right? Like natural law and divine command and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I just haven't really. Are there problems with that? What are the problems with that you know of?
With divine command theory?
No, with virtue theory.
Virtue theory is very popular among Christian philosophers, and as far as I know, most Christian philosophers currently take a combination of divine command theory and virtue theory together. So they say we should follow God's commands and try and act virtuous in every situation. The problems that I know about virtue theory is it is kind of loose and up to interpretation a lot more than a lot of philosophers would like, because virtue theory says you should act the absolute most virtuous you can in any given situation or choice you're faced with, right? But that's kind of hard to quantify in a lot of scenarios. It seems very abstract and not very useful. And one of the big concerns with moral philosophy, with ethics, is how it translates into people's day-to-day lives. Like how do they properly live ethical lives? And so a lot of that is considering how that works with laws. And the problem, one of the problems with virtue theory is like, how do you translate that into laws? Like, how do you translate, oh, you should be courageous?
Well, should you translate that into laws?
Yeah. So it's just like, it's very abstract and not very concrete for a lot of philosophers. But very many philosophers do hold to virtue theory. I don't think it's bad at all. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think I also hold to, well, moral philosophy is kind of interesting because you kind of need to, it's like a combination of a lot of stuff, like I was saying. Like, so if you ask me, do you think that you should be virtuous and that humans have a moral obligation to live as virtuous people? I would say, yeah, you know, that makes sense to me.
Of course.
So, but it's just hard. We haven't discovered a system that like hits every single point that we needed to hit, if that kind of makes sense.
Okay. So, sidetrack. What is your favorite thing in philosophy?
My favorite thing in philosophy. Wow, what a good question that I should have seen coming that I did not prepare
Ambush
for
with a
all.
basic question about something you care about.
I really like philosophical theology. I think models of God is something that I'm working on a lot, and that I'm thinking about doing my master's thesis on something revolving around models of God, because I think that's really interesting and gets me hyped. I'm also very into aesthetics and moral philosophy. I think super important. Aesthetics in general, I think philosophy of beauty is so powerful and moving and like actually impacts humans such a huge amount, and not a lot of people are doing a lot of work on it. But yeah, probably that. Models of God are like, you know, if you've ever heard the terms like classical theism or open theism, those are two different models of God. Pantheism, panentheism, just essentially like what does God look like what is God actually like? Yeah. So that's a huge, heavily debated, not settled topic in even just in Christian philosophy. Christian philosophers have so many different models of God that they wrestle with. And it's important because no matter which one you settle on, that has huge implications for how you live your Christian life and even just like read the Bible, right? Like an open theist is going to read the Bible very, very differently than a classical theist. So
I should think so.
And if you think, well, obviously classical theism is the correct answer, you can think that, and it would be great if you got into philosophy and argued for that, because classical theism is kind of dying out. I won't say dying out, becoming less popular over time. And open theism is becoming huge. Open theism is like the fastest growing model of God among philosophers. That
what
I
a
know
surprise.
Of. Yeah. People really like open theism.
Yeah, I bet they do.
Yeah. Well, man, when you get into it, classical theism has a lot of issues. It's like really tough. Yeah. I'm going to be honest, because I think people probably don't know enough about this topic to like be mad at me for saying this, but I'm not a classical theist. I consider myself a relational theist, which is a whole other different thing. That's not open theism. I want to be clear. I'm not an open theist, but yeah. So I find it pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Might write my thesis on it. But it's important. We should figure out what God is like. Like, what are God's attributes? That's a question that we should try and answer.
You can't answer that with the Bible, Jordan?
Not super accurately, which some people might get mad at me for saying. Like, we know a lot about God. And I want to be clear, none of these questions should impact like your personal relationship or your personal faith with God, right? We can definitely know a lot of things for certain about God. But one of them, like, you know, timelessness is a classical theist attribute. Is God outside of time? And you say, well, of course God's outside of time. Well, A, that's not explicitly stated anywhere in the Bible. And B, there have been a lot of philosophers who have been like, that's completely incoherent. Like, that is a logical impossibility for somebody to be outside of time. So God must not exist. And we want to fight back against people who say God must not exist because it's logically impossible that he exists, so maybe we should examine those beliefs and try and figure out the solutions to some of those issues.
Do you think there's solutions to every problem?
On the other side of eternity, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Jordan, what's your least favorite thing in all of philosophy?
Well, man, what another good basic question that I should have.
Let's get into the nitty gritty of it. What do you hate about philosophy?
I don't know that there's anything that I hate in philosophy. I'll tell you my biggest pet peeve right now. I know it's funny because we were just talking about logical fallacies. I hate when people talk about logical fallacies and they have zero understanding of what they are, because it's become very popular to just be like, oh, this person's committing a logical fallacy when you said this thing. And then you look at it and you're like, no, they're not. Like, you're just throwing out terms that you learned on David Letterman or something. Like,
Letterman.
You know how many Facebook arguments I've seen where if somebody's been like, oh, that's a red herring, or oh, that's a straw man. And I'm like, no, it's not at all. Like, please don't use those terms unless you're absolutely certain that you know what you're talking about. So that's probably my biggest pet peeve. And that's not like, there are definitely some philosophers who do that, but that's not like largely philosophers. That's just like general public people, Mm-hmm. It's kind of like with any discipline, because I'm sure this is very common. We know this is very common with like biblical studies and stuff, but people will say like the wildest things, like, Constantine decided the canon of scripture at 325. And you're like, where did you even get that? Right? So like, just accusing somebody of committing a logical fallacy, that's philosophy's Constantine decided scripture at 325. Yeah.
We still need to get t-shirts that say it's Constantine's fault.
Oh yeah, we do.
Yeah,
man, we should make those. Put those in the official Sacred Cows Pod store.
Yeah, if you want there to be a Sacred Cows Pod store, like, comment, and subscribe, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and rate us 5 stars on Spotify, and tell your best friend and your best friend's dog.
Yeah, or just harass us on every video we post.
And if you're,
where's the store?
If you're a Zoomer and you have Boomer parents or Gen X parents, go on to their YouTube account and like and follow us and subscribe. And
yeah,
no, don't do that. That's probably wrong. Somehow ethically.
Yeah,
but.
Trick your parents into subscribing to our podcast.
Give them this podcast.
Yeah.
They say the best way to get a podcast out there is by word of mouth. So
really?
Yeah. Have you not heard that?
I have not heard that.
Yeah.
But I will say anecdotally, anecdotal is a philosophical term. Anecdotally, I think every podcast I've ever started listening to, I've heard of word of mouth from somebody.
I don't think I've ever been recommended something by Spotify.
Yeah.
Been like, oh yeah. Which there was one comment that we didn't talk about where somebody was like, oh, the algorithm recommended this to me on YouTube. Yeah. And I was like, dude, kudos to you for actually listening to it, because I don't trust that at all.
Yeah. Amazing. What a brave person.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever clicked on a recommendation. Man.
And just been like, yeah, this is it.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Dang. Cool. Living life on the wild side over there, just clicking whatever random thing Spotify throws at you. Respect, man.
So I can tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we'll close with this.
Okay,
I think, because I think we're good. We're at a good space.
Mm-hmm.
If you have questions about philosophy, please badger Jordan in the comments.
Yeah.
What is that philosophical argument where it's like, if this thing happens and we don't prepare for it, we're screwed, but we should prepare for it because, you know what I'm talking about? Like, if dragons invade the earth.
You mean like Pascal's wager?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my least favorite thing in the entirety of philosophy.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I've heard.
Okay. We can end with this. We can end on Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager is, there was a philosophical theologian who was named Pascal. I forget his first name.
Go figure. Who wasn't named Jerome. He did. Jerome did.
It might have been.
Pascal's wager.
I honestly can't remember.
Or Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov Pascal. So he came up with this. We call it Pascal's wager, but he wrote this piece of philosophy, and he was essentially arguing. He was like, listen, either God exists or he doesn't exist, and if you're having trouble deciding between those two things, if God doesn't exist and you're wrong about it, and you live a religious life, like, what are you really losing out on, is his argument. Because you're still going to live like a religious moral life. You're still going to be fine. You're not going to have to worry about hell or anything. So even if you act as if God exists and you're wrong about it, you don't really lose out on anything. However, if you act as if God doesn't exist and you're wrong about that, you lose out way more, right? He's essentially saying you're playing with hellfire. And so he's saying, if you're struggling between these two things and you don't know which one to pick, you might as well just be a theist, because you have way more to lose by being an atheist if you're wrong about it. I think Pascal's wager gets a bad rap, Joe, a very bad rap, yeah. Because I think people lack the context that conversation was happening in. Pascal, do you know what deism is?
Yeah, of course.
Pascal was working predominantly during that time with very many deists or very many agnostics. And so you had a ton of people who are like, we literally cannot know either way whether or not God exists. And this conversation is stupid and you should just believe whatever you want. And that was the predominant philosophy of his day. And so he was like, listen, if you're not going to reason out your faith, and this is the context to Pascal's wager. He's like, if you're not going to reason out your faith and you are actually in the point in your life where you're like, I have no idea which one I should follow, and I don't think anybody can know. He's like, if that's where you are, you should just be a theist, because you have more to lose by being an atheist if you're wrong. And so I think in that context, it makes a lot more sense if you're talking to people who are like, you literally cannot know either way, and so it's stupid to even try and figure it out, and you should just believe whatever you want to believe. If you're at the point where you're believing whatever you want to believe, you should just be a theist. That's Pascal's wager. And so I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't think it's as dumb as a lot of people make it out to be.
I just think that, that's fine. It's like, I think therefore I am.
Let me have that one.
I think therefore I am is only compelling in context.
Yeah.
But I still think that you can apply the wager problem to literally anything.
Yeah, well, that's its like main gripe is people are like, you can say that about anything, dude.
Yeah. Which is why I said dragons in the beginning. It's like you could apply this to if dragons invade the earth and you prepare versus not preparing for it.
You're in danger of dragon fire.
I mean, literally, that's what people who have fallout bunkers are doing right now. Mm-hmm. Like, we need to prepare for this as though it's going to happen. It's like, but you have really no proof that this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe.
I don't necessarily...
Not to dog on our portion of the podcast that prep.
Is in survival
you should be
bunkers.
Prepared for stuff. That's a good thing.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
Man. I could get off on a tangent about Descartes right now. I'm reading a book, and the guy, I'm not going to say the author or even what the book is about, because then people could figure it out, and I cannot stand it, so I don't want people to get like harass him or anything. Not that they would do that.
Our large following will go and harass
the
them.
guy quotes and talks about Descartes so much and like completely does not understand anything about Descartes. It's like almost comical. It's like if somebody was talking about, actually I'm not going to say that. I don't want us to get like YouTube struck if I say a certain fascist leader from the 1940s, but it's like talking about that guy, that historical figure, and being like, yeah, and he was just promoting love and prosperity and equality his entire life. Like that level of, you have not read a single word that this guy wrote, huh?
I think you already screwed us because you said fascist.
Oh, darn it. Sorry, YouTube. YouTube, if you're watching this, YouTube. Sorry.
If we ever going to monetize our
what's the CEO's name? Not YouTube? Kathleen Kennedy.
Is that's Disney.
Yeah.
Now we're demonetized because we said Disney.
Yeah. Disney's going to copyright strike us.
Demonetized. We're not actually monetized. If you would like us to be monetized, you can like, comment, and subscribe.
8 years from now, we'll be we'll be monetized and we'll be able to afford better mics.
I just want to shove that into everything that we do from now on.
Yeah.
It's like,
man.
hey.
Sorry, did you have more to say?
No, go.
Thanks for being here. We love and appreciate you guys. Please leave a comment if you liked it or if you have questions or you want to talk about the episode. As you've seen, we love interacting with people. So, and please be sure to subscribe. I'm trying to get a new tattoo. So, we will see y'all next week.
See you later.
Bye.